happened on a bitter winter night in Brooklyn, New York. A night so still that even the city's usual chaos seemed to pause. Snow had not yet fallen, but the sky hung heavy with silence, as if the air itself was holding its breath. From the 14th floor of a steel and glass apartment building, something broke through that silence. It wasn't snow. It wasn't debris. It was alive. A blur of soft cream fur plummeted from the balcony, spinning helplessly against the darkness. Not a bird, not a leaf, but a 10-week-old golden retriever puppy named Hope, flung like garbage from the heavens above. No sound came at first, just the sickening stillness of a creature falling, a heartbeat wrapped in golden silk hurtling toward the unforgiving concrete below. Inside apartment 14B, just moments earlier, the world had seemed deceptively calm. Clara Monroe, a 32-year-old lighting designer with a quiet strength and tired eyes, had stepped out briefly to buy oat crackers and almond milk. She hadn't locked the door. In her absence, the man she had finally found the courage to leave, Dante Mercer, returned. Tall, calculated, and seething, he moved through the apartment like a shadow. Gone were his photos, his scent, his presence, replaced by soft fairy lights and a small wicker basket lined with a blue knit blanket. In that basket lay Hope, innocent, curious, and entirely unaware of the danger that now stood above him. When Dante picked him up by the scruff, Hope let out a confused whimper, his tiny tail wagging once at the familiar scent. He had never known cruelty. Not until that moment. Without a word, Dante walked onto the balcony, approached the edge, and with a motion as casual as tossing out trash, let go. There was no scream, no hesitation, just a small body vanishing into the cold air below. The city didn't notice. Not yet. The lights still flickered, horns still honked, but beneath that tower, fate had already shifted. Somewhere below, a man stood unknowingly in the puppy's path. And though Hope had been thrown away as if his life meant nothing, the story was far from over. What waited below wasn't death, it was destiny, waiting with open arms. 5 blocks away, the last embers of a bakery fire were dying out on the top floor of a weathered brick building. Red emergency lights pulsed across wet pavement, casting fleeting reflections on the smoke-streaked windows. Firefighter Thomas Brenner, a 41-year-old man with the build of someone who had carried both bodies and burdens, was coiling a hose for the final time that night. His movements were steady, methodical, muscle memory carved from years of war zones and blazing infernos. He wasn't expecting miracles tonight. He wasn't expecting anything at all. Then he saw it. Something was falling, fast. At first, he thought it was debris, maybe a charred piece of roofing knocked loose, but this wasn't jagged or lifeless. It was moving, tumbling, a small cream-colored blur cutting through the charcoal sky like a wounded comet. No wings, no scream, just velocity and helplessness. His instincts kicked in before his mind caught up. The hose dropped. His boots slammed against the pavement as he sprinted forward, dodging equipment, shouting voices fading behind him. He didn't know what he was running toward, only that it was alive, and it had no business falling from that height. In that breathless moment, the world narrowed to cold air, flashing lights, and the blur descending faster than thought. He didn't have time to think, only time to act. He dove. The impact rattled through his bones. His shoulder slammed into the concrete as his arms wrapped around the falling creature midair. It wasn't a bag or trash or some piece of detritus from above. It was warm, trembling, fragile, a living thing, a puppy. Thomas hit the ground hard but never let go. The bundle in his arms let out a sharp, broken whimper, barely a sound, but enough to say, "I'm still here." He sat up slowly, heart pounding in his chest like it had just outrun death itself. He unwrapped his coat to reveal the tiny body, limp and bloody, one hind leg twisted unnaturally, a small gash above its eye, but breathing, still breathing. A gasp from nearby broke the moment. A bystander with a phone had caught it all. But Thomas didn't look up. He cradled the dog like glass, whispering, "You held on, little one. You held on." The weight in his arms wasn't heavy, but it carried the kind of importance that settles in your soul and never leaves. The streets of Brooklyn were nearly deserted by the time Thomas Brenner pulled the fire department's secondary rig up to a quiet corner near Park Slope. The city felt hushed, like it knew something fragile was fighting to survive. In the back seat, wrapped tightly in a flannel-lined crate, the golden puppy lay motionless, except for the faint, uneven rise and fall of his chest. Blood clung to his fur like a cruel reminder. His breaths were shallow, his pulse erratic. Time was ticking. Waiting at the entrance of a small, dimly lit veterinary clinic stood Dr. Elaine Rosner, a woman in her early 40s with a calm that could steady any storm. Dressed in scrubs under a wool coat, slippers on her feet, she had responded to Thomas's call without hesitation. Years ago, they had shared something more than just professional respect, something tender that grief had long buried. But tonight wasn't about the past. Tonight was about saving what could still be saved. She opened the door without a word. No questions, no small talk, just purpose. Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and lavender. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting a pale glow over stainless steel counters and padded exam tables. Elaine took the crate from Thomas and gently lifted the puppy onto the table. Her assistant, Malik, a quiet young man with careful hands, moved with practiced efficiency, already prepping supplies. Elaine's brow furrowed as she examined the tiny patient. Fractured leg, possible internal bruising. He's concussed, but no spinal damage. Her voice was steady, but her hands moved fast. She cleaned the wound on the puppy's head, applied a temporary splint, and started an IV. He fell? She asked. 14 stories, Thomas replied, his voice low, almost ashamed of the truth. Elaine paused for half a beat, then looked at him. And he's still breathing. She said softly, more to herself than anyone else. The puppy whimpered, just a whisper of pain, but it was enough to shatter the silence. "You're a fighter," Elaine murmured, stroking his ear gently. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside that room, under humming lights and tired eyes, a miracle was unfolding. He shouldn't have survived. But somehow, he had. And in that moment, everyone there silently agreed. This life was worth saving. Back in her apartment, Clara Monroe sat frozen on the edge of her bed, her phone trembling in her hand. The room around her was quiet, too quiet, eerily undisturbed, yet hollow. The blue knit blanket still lay by the balcony door, untouched. The puppy's food bowl remained half full, but he was gone. No paw prints, no whimpers, just a sickening absence. When she returned from the corner store earlier that night, the door had been unlocked. At first, she thought she had simply forgotten. But deep down, her gut knew better. She had left in a hurry, trying to breathe after a week of emotional wreckage. She hadn't changed the locks since leaving Dante, the man who once made her feel special, and then made her feel like nothing. She never imagined he'd return for Hope, the small golden puppy she'd only adopted 6 days ago. He hadn't loved the dog. He resented him because Hope had started to heal something in her. Desperation clawed at her as she scrambled through social media, forums, neighborhood pages, anything. Her eyes burned from scrolling, her heart racing. Then she saw it. A video. Blurry, shaky footage from a local blog. A firefighter diving forward into the darkness, catching something midair, a cream-colored blur falling from the sky. Her breath hitched. She paused the video and stared. The cinnamon stripe down the back, the 2 big paws, the tiny black smudge on the front left leg. It was Hope. The phone slipped from her fingers and hit the floor, but she didn't move. Her body folded in on itself. No scream came, just the tightening of her chest and the inability to breathe. Her sweet, gentle companion had been thrown, and yet, somehow, caught. A flicker of memory surfaced. Hope nestled into her side that first night when she had cried herself to sleep. She had whispered to him through tears, "You're not just a dog, are you?" Now, she realized how right she had been. Her phone buzzed again. A message. A name. A clinic in Park Slope. Clara stood on shaky legs. Her hands fumbled for keys. Her coat, the scarf that still carried traces of his scent. The hallway felt colder than ever, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Somewhere out there, her soul was still breathing, and she needed to hold him again. The clinic door chimed softly as Clara Monroe stepped in from the cold. Wind howled behind her like a wounded animal, clawing at the glass windows before fading into silence. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and warmth, healing and hope wrapped into one. She clutched her coat tighter, her heart pounding not from the weather, but from fear. Fear that she was too late, that the miracle she'd seen in the video was just that, a fleeting miracle. Not reality. The receptionist, a young woman with a buzz cut and tired eyes, offered a soft smile. "You're here for the golden retriever?" Clara nodded, Her voice caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. "Wait here. Dr. Rosner is expecting you." She didn't sit. She couldn't. Her knees felt hollow, her breath shallow. The moments dragged like lifetimes until a door finally opened and Dr. Elaine Rosner appeared. Her face was unreadable, but not unkind. She studied Clara briefly, then nodded. "He's resting. He's stable. You can see him." They walked down a narrow hallway lined with faded photos of happy pets and grateful owners. But Clara barely noticed. Her world was narrowing with each step, pulling tight around a single thought. Is he really okay? When Elaine opened the last door, the breath left Clara's lungs entirely. There he was. Hope lay curled on a cushioned recovery bed, swaddled in a soft fleece blanket. His tiny leg was wrapped in gauze, his head resting gently on a rolled towel. He looked impossibly small, fragile. But when she stepped closer, his ears twitched. Then, slowly, his eyes opened, blurry, wide and searching. They found her. "Hope," she whispered, dropping to her knees. His tail stirred beneath the blanket, feeble but certain, and then with more determination than strength, he tried to rise. His little body shook with the effort, legs scrambling against the padding. "No, baby, easy." Clara's voice cracked, tears streaming freely now. She reached out, and he collapsed into her touch, burying his face into the crook of her arm. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't protect you. I didn't." Hope let out a broken sigh, not of pain but recognition. He knew her. He remembered. In the doorway, Elaine turned away quietly, giving them space. Some moments don't need witnesses. Some reunions born from pain are stitched together with nothing but love. Morning light had just begun to creep across the Brooklyn skyline when the firehouse phone buzzed. Thomas Brenner, seated quietly near Engine 72, had barely touched his coffee when Frankie Delgado, the youngest member of the crew, jogged in from the bay doors, slightly breathless. "There's a guy outside asking for you," Frankie said, glancing over his shoulder. Didn't give a name. Tall, leather coat, looks off. Thomas stood slowly. A quiet shift in the air had already told him something wasn't right. Some instincts, especially the ones carved from war and fire, never dulled. As he stepped outside, the cold air hit him like a slap. And there he was. Dante Mercer paced the sidewalk like a caged animal. His hair, once slicked with perfection, was now disheveled. His eyes, icy and calculating, were wild with something darker than anger. His voice cracked through the quiet like glass under pressure. "You!" He barked, stepping forward. "Where is she?" Thomas didn't flinch. He said nothing, didn't move. Just watched, steady as stone. "You think you're some hero, taking in strays? You don't know anything about her." Dante's voice rose, manic. "She's unstable. She lies. You threw a 10-week-old puppy off a balcony," Thomas interrupted, his voice low and unshakable. Dante froze. For a split second, his bravado faltered. Then he scoffed. "You don't have proof." Thomas didn't blink. The dog lived. "That's all the proof I need." Dante lunged. It wasn't clean or calculated. It was wild, desperate. But Thomas, trained in combat and grounded by purpose, sidestepped with ease. He caught Dante's wrist midair, twisted, and brought him down in one fluid motion, knee on his back, breath rattling between them. "Cops are 5 minutes out," Frankie called from the doorway, phone still in hand. Cameras caught everything. Dante stopped struggling. His fight was over. What remained was panting, venom, and the bitter realization that this time, no one believed his version of the story. Inside the firehouse loft, Clara stood by the window, watching the confrontation below. She hadn't looked away. Not once. She turned to Hope, curled at her feet, and whispered, "It's over. I think it's really over." It started as an idea shared over paper cups of cocoa and hushed conversations beneath the hum of late-night clinic lights. A quiet dream formed in the aftermath of chaos. Thomas, Clara, and Dr. Elaine Rosner, each carrying their own scars, found themselves bound not just by the rescue of a wounded puppy, but by something deeper, a need to turn pain into purpose. They called it the Sky Paw Project. At first, it was just a name, but soon it became a mission. With Thomas setting aside every spare dollar from his shifts at the firehouse, Elaine selling a small piece of inherited land upstate, and Clara offering her skills as a lighting designer free of charge, they began building something more than just walls. They built a sanctuary. A year after hope fell from the sky and into Thomas's arms, the Sky Paw Rescue Center opened its doors in a renovated red brick building tucked along Flatbush Avenue. Outside, the chill of early spring still lingered, but inside, the warmth was unmistakable. Golden light bathed the reception area, not harsh or clinical, but soft, designed by Clara to mimic the sunrises she once thought she'd never see again. Each kennel was more like a bedroom than a cage, lined with calming textures, gentle colors, and quiet music. There was a trust room filled with cushions and blankets where the most fragile dogs could relearn safety. Above its door hung a wooden plaque, Hope's Corner. By the entrance, fully grown and gleaming like he had never known suffering, sat the golden retriever who had brought them all together. His bandana read, "Therapy dog, ask me for a hug." Hope now walked with pride, the faint scar on his hind leg nearly hidden beneath thick, honey-colored fur. Children adored him. Adults knelt beside him with tears in their eyes. He had become a symbol, not of tragedy, but of survival. That day, as guests wandered through the halls, meeting animals given a second chance, Thomas stood beside Clara in the lobby. She watched Hope trot toward a small boy with wide eyes and outstretched arms. "He was born for this," she whispered. Thomas nodded slowly. So were we. They had turned the fall into a beginning, a place built from ashes and healing hands, a home for every soul waiting to be caught. The elevator creaked as it climbed toward the 14th floor, each flickering number on the panel pulsing like a heartbeat caught in the throat. Clara Monroe stood beside Thomas Brenner, her fingers wrapped tightly around the leash of the golden retriever at her feet. Hope sat patiently between them, alert yet calm, as if he understood that this ride meant more than just returning to an old place. It meant reclaiming something that had once been taken. She hadn't been back to apartment 14B since that night, since the silence swallowed her whole, since her trust was shattered and her sanctuary turned into a scene of quiet violence. She had spent months healing, building a new life in the safety of Thomas's presence and the light of the Skypaw Center. But something inside her knew she couldn't truly move forward until she faced the place where everything had fallen apart. When the elevator chimed and the doors opened, the hallway looked exactly as she remembered. Same worn carpet, same flickering light just outside her door. But Clara had changed, and so had the small pup who once fell from her life like a dropped prayer. Her hand trembled as she turned the key. The lock clicked, the door swung open. The apartment was empty, stripped of furniture, void of warmth, a hollow shell of what used to be. But there was no fear this time. Just quiet, measured, final. Clara walked slowly across the room, pausing at the spot by the balcony where Hope's basket had once sat. From her coat pocket, she pulled out a small, weathered collar, the one he'd worn the night he was taken. She set it gently on the shelf, not as a reminder of pain, but as a marker of survival. Thomas watched from the doorway, arms crossed, heart heavy. He stepped forward, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "No one deserves to be hurt for loving right," he whispered. Clara leaned into his touch, her eyes glassy but strong. Behind them, Hope lay down near the door, resting his head on his paws. When they left that apartment, the door closed softly behind them. No ghosts followed. Outside, the sky was beginning to shift. No longer winter, not yet spring, but it smelled like something new, like something ready to grow. This story isn't just about a puppy who survived the unthinkable. It's about what happens when love refuses to give up, when pain, instead of breaking us, becomes the seed of something stronger. Hope may have fallen from a building, but he didn't fall into darkness. He fell into the arms of someone who cared. And from that moment on, a broken woman, a quiet firefighter, and a tired veterinarian came together to create something extraordinary. A second chance, not just for a dog, but for themselves. Through tragedy, they built healing. Through sorrow, they found purpose. And in the heart of one golden retriever, they rediscovered the kind of love that asks for nothing, but gives everything. Animals feel pain, they feel fear, but they also feel joy, loyalty, and deep, unshakable love. They are not toys, they are not disposable. They are living souls who trust us, rely on us, and often love us more than we love ourselves. Let Hope's journey be a reminder that we are all capable of kindness, even in the darkest moments. That what we choose to protect reveals who we truly are. So if this story moved you, let it also call you to action. Speak up for the voiceless. Adopt when you can. Support rescue efforts. Teach children empathy. And above all, never ignore cruelty when you see it. Because sometimes all it takes to save a life is one person who refuses to look away. Let us be that person, not just for hope, but for every animal waiting to be seen, to be saved, to be loved.